The Sunday dinner table at the Harrison household had become a weekly battleground, and tonight's topic was my apparently hopeless career in music. Dad sat at the head of the table, carving the roast beef with surgical precision while delivering his latest lecture on practical life choices. "Alex, you're 29 years old," he said, not looking up from his methodical slicing. "It's time to put away childish things and focus on building a real future." My stepmother Linda nodded enthusiastically from her position at Dad's right hand. "Your father's absolutely right, sweetheart. Music is a lovely hobby, but it's not a sustainable career path." My half-brother Marcus, home from his first year at business school, leaned forward with the authority of someone who'd just completed Economics 101. "Dad, maybe Alex could start in an entry-level position at Harrison Electronics. Learn the business from the ground up." Dad's company, Harrison Electronics, manufactured components for industrial automation systems. He'd built it from a small repair shop into a mid-sized operation with 47 employees and annual revenues around $8 million. It was solid, respectable work, the kind of business that provided steady employment and reliable profits. It was also, according to Dad's frequent reminders, a real business unlike my music hobby. "That's actually a good idea," Dad said, finally looking up from the roast. "I could start you in quality control, maybe move you into customer service after 6 months. Give you a chance to understand how actual business works." "Quality control sounds perfect," Linda added. "Regular hours, steady paycheck, health benefits. All the things musicians don't get." I took another bite of mashed potatoes and let the conversation flow around me. These family dinners had become exercises in patience over the past 2 years, ever since I'd graduated from Berklee College of Music and decided to pursue recording and production full-time. "The thing is, Alex," Marcus continued, warming to his role as the family business consultant, "the music industry is essentially a lottery system. A tiny percentage of people make significant money and everyone else struggles." "Exactly," Dad agreed. "It's not like manufacturing where there's consistent demand, predictable profit margins, reliable growth." My sister Emma, who was 16 and still believed that following your dreams was possible, tried to offer support. "But Alex is really talented. And didn't you say your studio has been busy lately?" Dad waved dismissively. "Busy doesn't mean profitable, Emma. Alex might be recording local bands and doing some production work, but that's not the same as running a real business with employees, overhead, and actual revenue." "How much do you typically make in a month from your music work?" Linda asked with the tone of someone conducting a financial intervention. I considered the question while chewing slowly. Last month, Harmony Records, the label I'd started 3 years ago, had generated about $2.7 million in revenue from our roster of artists, streaming royalties and licensing deals. But that wasn't information I'd chosen to share with my family. "It varies," I said simply. "See." Dad pointed his fork at me triumphantly. "Variable income is not a foundation for adult life. You need consistency, security, a career path with advancement opportunities. Plus benefits," Linda added. "Medical insurance, retirement planning, paid vacation. These things matter when you're thinking about starting a family someday." Marcus nodded sagely. "The music industry is also being disrupted by technology. Streaming services, artificial intelligence, changes in consumer behavior. It's not a stable sector for long-term career planning." I almost smiled at that analysis. Marcus had clearly been reading business publications and was eager to demonstrate his newfound expertise in market dynamics. "Whereas industrial electronics," Dad said, "that's a growth industry. Manufacturing is coming back to America. Companies need automation systems, quality control equipment, precision components. Harrison Electronics is perfectly positioned for the next decade," Marcus agreed. "Dad, you should show Alex the quarterly reports. The growth trajectory is really impressive." "I'd be happy to," Dad said. "Alex, you could learn a lot about business fundamentals by studying how we've grown from a 2-man operation to what we are today." My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and saw it was from David Chin, my business manager at Harmony Records. "Alex, the Harrison Electronics acquisition just got final legal approval. All papers signed. Congratulations on your newest subsidiary." I felt that familiar flutter of satisfaction mixed with anticipation. The Harrison Electronics acquisition had been in development for 4 months, ever since we'd identified Dad's company as a strategic addition to our growing portfolio of manufacturing investments. Sorry, I said, setting my phone aside. Work message. Work? Dad asked skeptically. What kind of work emergency do musicians have on Sunday evening? Just some business details to sort out. Linda exchanged a meaningful look with Dad. Sweetheart, we're not trying to diminish what you do. But maybe it's time to think about what business means in a traditional sense. Traditional business, Marcus explained helpfully, involves scalable revenue models, predictable cash flow, tangible assets, and clear growth strategies. I nodded politely while he continued his lecture on business fundamentals. Take Dad's company, for example. Harrison Electronics has real assets: equipment, inventory, customer contracts, intellectual property. It generates consistent revenue through established relationships with industrial clients. Exactly, Dad said. That's what I've been trying to explain to you, Alex. Music might be personally fulfilling, but it doesn't create lasting value the way manufacturing does. Emma made another attempt to defend me. But Alex has won some awards, right? For production work. Awards don't pay the mortgage, Dad replied. I'm sure Alex is talented, but talent without business acumen doesn't lead to financial security. That's why working at Harrison Electronics would be so educational, Linda suggested. Alex could learn how real businesses operate while still pursuing music as a side interest. My phone started ringing. The caller ID showed Michael Torres, Corporate Development. Michael was my head of acquisitions at Harmony Holdings, the investment arm of Harmony Records. We'd been expanding beyond music into other industries, particularly manufacturing companies that could benefit from our capital and management expertise. I should take this, I said, standing up from the table. Alex, we're in the middle of family dinner, Dad said with mild irritation. I know, but it's important. I'll just be a minute. I stepped into the kitchen to answer the call. Michael, what's the status on the Harrison deal? Everything's finalized. We officially own Harrison Electronics as of 5 p.m. today. The purchase price was exactly what we discussed, $12.8 million. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Dad's company was indeed well-run and profitable, exactly the kind of solid manufacturing operation that fit perfectly into our diversified portfolio. And Robert Harrison has no idea about the ownership change? None at all. The acquisition was structured through our holding company, Meridian Industries, so his name will never appear on any documentation he'll see. As far as he knows, he's now working for a private equity firm that specializes in manufacturing acquisitions. When do we inform him? Tomorrow morning. I've scheduled a meeting with him and his management team to discuss the transition. Should I handle it personally, or would you prefer to be there? I looked back through the doorway at the dining room, where my family was continuing their analysis of why my music career was impractical and unsustainable. I'll handle the Monday meeting personally. Are you sure? This might be complicated given the family relationship. That's exactly why I should handle it personally. When I returned to the dining room, the conversation had moved on to Marcus's internship plans for the summer. The experience at Goldman Sachs will be invaluable, Dad was saying. Investment banking teaches you how real money gets made and moved. Plus the networking opportunities, Linda added. Marcus will be meeting people who actually understand high-level finance. I sat back down and resumed eating while listening to their discussion of Marcus's bright future in traditional business. Alex, Dad said, turning his attention back to me, have you given any more thought to my offer? Which offer? Working at Harrison Electronics. Starting in quality control, learning the manufacturing business. I appreciate the offer, Dad. But I'm pretty committed to my current projects. Dad set down his knife and fork with the deliberate patience of someone preparing to deliver hard truths. Alex, I love you and I want what's best for you. But commitment to projects that don't generate real income isn't the same as building a career. Dad's right, Marcus said. Opportunity cost is a real factor here. Every year you spend pursuing music is a year you're not building equity in a traditional career. Plus, Linda added, you're not getting any younger. At some point you need to think about long-term security. My phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed Robert Harrison, Harrison Electronics. I looked at Dad, whose expression changed from patient concern to confusion. Alex, why is my office calling you? I have no idea. But I did have an idea. Michael had probably accelerated our timeline and was already reaching out to Dad about tomorrow's transition meeting. Answer it, Dad said. Find out what they want. I answered the call, putting it on speaker so the family could hear. Hello, Mr. Harrison. Alex, thank you for taking my call. I'm calling about a meeting tomorrow morning regarding some changes at Harrison Electronics. Dad's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Changes. Mr. Harrison, this is Robert Harrison. You're on speaker with my family. What kind of changes? Oh, hello, Robert. Well, we've been acquired by an investment firm called Meridian Industries. They want to meet with all key personnel tomorrow to discuss the transition. Acquired. Dad's voice was barely audible. Yes. It happened very suddenly. Apparently, they've been researching our company for months and made an offer we couldn't refuse. Dad looked at me across the table, his expression a mixture of confusion and dawning concern. How much did they offer? Marcus asked. $12.8 million. All cash, no financing contingencies. Linda gasped audibly. Marcus dropped his fork entirely. $12.8 million? Dad repeated slowly. It's actually quite generous, given our size and market position. The acquiring firm specializes in growing mid-sized manufacturing companies. Who owns this Meridian Industries? Dad asked. That's the interesting part. It's owned by someone in the entertainment industry. Apparently, they've been diversifying into manufacturing as a long-term investment strategy. I felt my stomach drop. Michael had clearly decided to accelerate the revelation timeline. Someone in entertainment? Dad's voice was getting higher. Yes. The representative I spoke with mentioned that the owner has deep roots in music and recording, but also understands manufacturing and traditional business. Dad was staring at me across the table with an expression I'd never seen before. Mr. Harrison, Dad said carefully, who exactly owns Meridian Industries? Well, Robert, that's actually why I'm calling Alex. It turns out the owner of Meridian Industries is someone your family knows very well. The silence in the dining room was complete except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Who is it? Dad whispered. Your daughter, Alex Harrison. She owns the company that just acquired Harrison Electronics. Dad's fork clattered to his plate and he stared at me with his mouth open. Alex owns what? Linda asked faintly. She owns Meridian Industries, which just purchased Harrison Electronics for $12.8 million. Marcus was staring at me like I'd started speaking in ancient languages. Alex, is this some kind of joke? I looked around the table at their shocked faces. At Dad, who had spent the evening explaining why musicians don't make real money. At Linda, who had been worried about my lack of health benefits. At Marcus, who had been lecturing me about business fundamentals. It's not a joke. Alex, Dad said slowly, how do you own a company worth $12.8 million? Actually, Dad, I own several companies. Meridian Industries is just one subsidiary of Harmony Holdings. Harmony Holdings? I pulled out my phone and showed them the corporate website. It's the investment arm of Harmony Records, which is my record label. Your record label? Linda's voice was barely a whisper. The music business I've been building for the past 3 years. Marcus was scrolling through the Harmony Holdings website on his own phone. Alex, this shows annual revenues of over $50 million. Last year was good. This year we're tracking towards $75 million. Dad was still staring at his plate, processing the magnitude of what he'd just learned. Alex, he said finally, if you own a $50 million company, why didn't you tell us? I looked around the table at the family members who had spent the evening explaining why my music career was impractical and financially unsustainable. Because every time I've tried to discuss my business, you've dismissed it as a hobby and suggested I get a real job. We didn't know. You didn't ask. You assumed that because I work in music, I couldn't possibly be successful in traditional business terms. But Alex, Marcus protested, you never mentioned owning multiple companies or having employees or generating this kind of revenue. Marcus, 3 months ago you suggested I consider an entry-level position at a marketing firm because music doesn't provide career advancement opportunities. His face flushed slightly. I was trying to be helpful. You were trying to manage someone you decided was failing. Linda was reading something on her phone. Alex, there's an article here about Harmony Records. It says you've signed artists who've won Grammy nominations. 3 nominations this year, actually. And you've been featured in Billboard magazine as one of the top independent label executives under 30. That article came out 6 months ago. Dad looked up from his plate. Alex, why are you acquiring Harrison Electronics? Because it's a well-run, profitable company in a growth industry. Exactly the kind of manufacturing operation that fits into our diversified investment strategy. But it's my company. It was your company. As of 5 p.m. today, it's a subsidiary of Harmony Holdings. The reality was finally sinking in. Dad, who had spent the evening lecturing me about business fundamentals and practical career choices, was now learning that his impractical musician daughter had just purchased his company. What does this mean for my position? He asked quietly. I looked at my father, successful, hardworking Robert Harrison, who had built his company from nothing but had somehow convinced himself that his daughter's music career was worthless. It means we'll discuss your role in the company during our meeting tomorrow morning. Our meeting? At 9 a.m. The Harmony Holdings conference room downtown. We'll be reviewing the transition plan and discussing management structure. Management structure? Dad, you'll still run day-to-day operations, but you'll be reporting to the new oversight team I'm installing. Marcus was still reading articles on his phone. Alex, it says here that you own a recording studio complex worth $8 million. $9.2 million, actually. We expanded last year. And you have distribution deals with major streaming platforms. And physical distribution through traditional retail channels. Linda looked up from her own phone. Alex, this article says you've been invited to speak at industry conferences about the future of independent music business. I spoke at 3 conferences this year. About business strategy and revenue diversification. The music industry has become very sophisticated in terms of multiple income streams and investment opportunities. Dad was quiet for a long moment, staring at his dinner as he processed this complete revision of his understanding of my career. Alex, I feel like an idiot. You're not an idiot, Dad. You just didn't have complete information. I've been lecturing you about business success while you were building something I couldn't even comprehend. You've been trying to look out for me based on what you thought you knew about the music industry. What I thought I knew was apparently completely wrong. Marcus looked up from his phone. Alex, this article says Harmony Records has been approached by major labels about acquisition offers. Several times. We've declined. Why? Because independence gives us more creative control and better profit margins. But surely the offers were substantial? I considered how much to reveal. The largest offer was $47 million. The number hit the dining room like a physical force. Emma actually dropped her water glass. $47 million? Dad asked weakly. For just the record label portion of the business. They weren't interested in the manufacturing investments or studio properties. Linda was staring at me like I was a completely different person. Alex, if someone offered you $47 million for your company, why do you still drive that old Honda? I looked around the table at their confused faces. Because the car works fine and I'd rather invest the money in growing the business than in luxury items. But you could afford. I could afford a lot of things. I choose to live modestly and reinvest profits. Dad finally looked up from his plate. Alex, what happens tomorrow? Tomorrow we discuss the integration of Harrison Electronics into the Harmony Holdings portfolio. And our family relationship? I thought about the past 2 years of Sunday dinners, about listening to lectures on practical career choices while quietly building a business empire that now included Dad's company. That depends on whether you're ready to see me as I actually am instead of who you assumed I was. I'm ready, Dad said quietly. And Alex? Yeah. I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago instead of trying to fix something that wasn't broken. Emma, who had been quiet during most of this conversation, finally spoke up. Alex, does this mean you're really, really successful? I smiled at my little sister. I'm successful by any measure you want to use them, including the traditional business measures Dad and Marcus have been talking about. That's so cool. What's cool is that you never doubted it, even when everyone else was trying to convince me to give up. Later that evening as I was leaving for home, Dad walked me to my Honda. the same modest car that had been evidence of my financial struggles. Alex, can I ask you something? Sure. When you acquire Harrison Electronics tomorrow, what are your plans for the company? I plan to expand the operations, invest in new technology, and probably double the workforce within 3 years. You're not going to shut it down or sell off the assets? Dad, I don't buy companies to destroy them. I buy them because I see their potential and want to help them grow. He nodded, relief evident in his expression. There's something else I need to say. What's that? You were right about music being a real business. I was wrong to dismiss it, and I'm sorry. Thanks, Dad. That means a lot. And Alex? Yeah. Next Sunday, instead of telling you what's wrong with the music industry, maybe you could tell us what you're doing right with it. As I drove home, I reflected on the evening's revelations. Tomorrow, Dad would walk into his first meeting as an employee of a company I owned. The family would have to adjust their understanding of my music hobby. But the most satisfying part wasn't the financial success or the business acquisition. It was finally being seen for who I'd become instead of who they'd assumed I was. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. It's showing them they never understood what you were building in the first place.